This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From beautiful design templates and custom domains to full-blown e-commerce, email campaigns, and powerful analytics that you can set up in minutes, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. I've been thinking a lot lately. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for 3 Blind Men and an Elephant. Today I want to talk about the 6 things the pandemic has taught me, or reaffirmed for me thus far. And this is going to take a little time. 1. You reach an age where it doesn't make sense to spend very much money or time on haircuts, especially if you have hair like mine. Which is not to say I don't have hair or that it doesn't grow quickly. I do have hair, and it does grow very quickly. Just not in the right places anymore. But what are you going to do? 2. If you're all dressed up with no place to go, that is, if you've got a pile of camera gear which is either your own or on loan from very generous vendors, but you can't rely on your usual locations or talent to shoot keeper images, and instead just shoot to find the differences among them, it becomes very clear that small details and intended use matter way more than top-line specs for 99% of us 99% of the time. Mindset, intent, eye skill, and just showing up matter most. Right now, we own, I'm not including our film cameras, my personal Leica SL2, Claudia's CL, our Panasonic GH5, our Sony a6400, my Apple iPhone 11 Pro, her Apple iPhone 7, glass for all of them. And we have in-house on loan, as I'm recording this video, a Panasonic G9, a Sony a7R IV, Fujifilm X-T4, Panasonic S1R and S1H, Leica M10P, and Hasselblad X1D II, with lenses from those manufacturers and glass from independent lens makers Viltrox and Tamron. Guess what? I've gotten great images from all of them. They're all amazing in their own way, not a single dud among them. So let's start with the glass, though of course one's priorities will change their attractiveness. Value for the dollar. The Viltrox 85 1.8, Tamron 24, 35, and 70 to 82.8s are all killer. Sharp, contrasty, fit for purpose, if you can live with a bit of chromatic aberration and distortion, especially the Tamrons in the latter case. Can operate with autofocus half a step slower than the brand name glass, and won't be using and abusing them day in and day out. They don't have aperture ring, custom function buttons, or OLED displays that some other lenses do. The Tamrons don't have the build quality that many OEM lenses do, but you can't beat them at the price. The thing of it is, most people will never notice anything but the sharpness at anything remotely resembling normal display sizes and viewing distances. Next. The Panasonic Leica DG10 to 25 1.7 and 50 to 200 2.84 are so well designed, so small and lightweight, so performant for their intended purpose, really well built, and offer so much coverage. Full frame equivalent field of view in just 2 lenses from 20 to 400 millimeters with reasonably shallow enough depth of field in the real world that if we never got another lens, we'd still be set for our video work 99% of the time using them on the GH5 or G9, as long as we stuck with 4K and continue to light our scenes. and didn't demand whack-a-mole focus shifts or Wile E. Coyote chasing Roadrunner tracking, which we don't. By the way, the G9 is currently selling for just under $1,000, which I think is a steal. We also own, for those cameras, the Olympus 75 1.8 and Leica DG Sumilux 15 1.7 primes, and they are among the best lenses available in the Micro Four Thirds lens ecosystem. They are just great, period. We even have a little Lumix 42.5 1.7, and while we rarely take it out, it is tiny, cheap, and far better than either parameter would suggest. The Leica DG 12-60 2.8-4, which we also own, it has built-in IS, it's small, lightweight, relatively inexpensive, and incredibly versatile. If it doesn't have the optical quality of the 10-25 or 50-200, it's the one lens we'd take if we could only take one, especially these days. Fujifilm's XF 16-55 and 50-140 2.8 red badge zooms on the X-T4 are sharper and better corrected than the 10-25, possibly even the 50-200, which is awesome. At the margin for stills, the larger, higher resolution APS-C sensor in the X-T4 allows one to get more out of the XF glass than the 20 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor of the Pannies can get out of the DG Leicas. The XF 50-140 has lens-based IS, important when you dive into the long end of it. The 16-55 doesn't have IS, but the X-T4's IBIS handles the difference well. At 8-to-1 magnification, these two XF zooms are among the best we've seen at any price. Sharp, contrasty, stunningly well corrected. Though at normal viewing distances, no one but the most anal retentive among us will notice. Which is why the one lens I have for my SL2 is the Summicron SL35 f2, and why Claudia has the Summa Lux TL35 1.4 and Summicron TL23 f2 for the CL. That is, because we can see that difference. We can feel it without pixel peeping. It's tangible. Well, that and because we can't afford more, at least for now. They are optically and mechanically extraordinary. The SL35, a notch beyond, best lens I've ever owned, and that includes the incredible, legendary Canon EF200 f1.8L. I really can see using that Leica glass for the rest of my life. That is the plan, in fact. No aperture rings, though. No buttons or switches of any kind. But I can deal. We've also been using Panasonic's L-mount Lumix S16-35-4 recently, and while it is not in the same league as the Summicron SL35, it's great. The images pop. It's small, light, relatively accessibly priced at $1,500, has a manual focus clutch, yeah baby, and I've gotten some great images with it. It should be on your short list for any full-frame L-mount camera, along with the Sigma 45 2.8 if you want something in the wide-to-wide normal range. Oh, the Leica CL bundle, starter bundle with the Elmerit 18mm f2 is selling right now for a whopping $1,600 discount, so you should check that out too. Even my 5th generation Summicron M50, an optical design dating back to the late 70s, though my particular copy was manufactured in 1998, renders beautifully on the M10P and really does have a special look that I missed when I first acquired it. This might have something to do with the fact that I can now use the rangefinder after sufficient practice without leaning on an EVF to nail focus most of the time. It's even easier to focus using an M to L adapter on the SL2. Sony's 70-200 f4 and 85 1.8, superb. The Zeiss Batis 85 1.8, 135 2.8, stellar. We own both. They can all do the job, and I'd guess that every single one of the lenses I've mentioned is nosebleed beyond most lenses of just a decade ago. I'm certain of it. But irrespective of brand, if you've got, say, 385mm f1.8 telephotos to test simultaneously, like the Viltrox, Zeiss, and Sony, as we do right now, or a pair of Holy Trinity long zooms like the Tamron 70-180 2.8 and Sony 70-200 f4, as we do right now, with no one to be in front of the camera, no urbanscape or landscape to inspire, none of it matters. But hold that thought so I can give a quick shout out to the outstanding team behind Squarespace. With their elegant layouts, click, drag, and drop interfaces, customization tools, and excellent support, Squarespace makes it a cinch for photographers and content creators, really any small to mid-sized businesses in any industry, to have an outsized presence on the web. Squarespace can literally have you up and running in minutes with a beautiful website and custom URL tailored to the way you want to present yourself. They really understand what it takes to build your online identity and grow your business. When you're ready to move beyond your basic site, Squarespace has you covered with their fully integrated platform. We know. Not only do we use Squarespace for our production company, blog, documentary, and personal photography websites, I think we've got half a dozen of them, but we've integrated email blasts and e-commerce. We book our street photography workshops through Squarespace. We sell our brand new Streets of New York book through Squarespace sites. It all just works. Now that the book has arrived and we've begun shipping, we especially appreciate the third-party integrations available through Squarespace like ShipStation.com. We're using that to print postage, automatically post back to Squarespace tracking numbers and shipping status. Less futzing. So, hop over to squarespace.com/u for a free trial and get 10% off your first website or domain purchase when you're ready to really give it a go by using the discount code HUGH. Again, that's squarespace.com/u and discount code HUGH at checkout. And I want to thank the good folks at Squarespace for sponsoring this episode of Three Blind Men and an Elephant. Back to lenses for a few more minutes. If you really need the shallowest depth of field, or the fastest, quietest, narrowest fields of view, these will be easier to find within a full-frame system than APS-C or Micro Four Thirds. It's generally true. And at this juncture, Sony's 5-year head start in full-frame mirrorless hybrid cameras and the publication of its lens mount spec mean it has the richest lens ecosystem, including third-party manufacturers, in the full-frame mirrorless segment. For now. But even now, only if we're talking about Canon's and Nikon's new full-frame mirrorless RF and Z-mount competitors, respectively. Their older SLR and DSLR EF and F-mount lens ecosystems remain the two richest of all time. You should ask yourself, how often will I be shooting wide open? I'd wager a lot less often than one might imagine. As soon as you do close the aperture a stop or two, once again, image quality differences narrow significantly. What if you want the smallest, lightest lenses for a given field of view and or maximum aperture? Well, in that case, look at Micro Four Thirds, which also has a vibrant third-party marketplace and, due to their short flange distance, the ability to adapt to just about any lens out there from PL to M and more. Though, like any other system, autofocus will work best with native mount glass. If you want some incredible autofocusing glass, which retain much of the solidity, silky focus throw, and industrial design vocabulary of the mid to late 20th century, including a lens or two with actual hard stops, OMG, at relatively accessible prices, take a long, hard look at Fujifilm's XF line. Lovely, lovely, lovely. If you want the most consistent, highest performance lens line I know of here, with the least copy-to-copy variation, it's the Leica SL lenses, hands down. They perform beyond even their own legendary M and S predecessors. Yes, they are the most expensive optics out there, and there are fewer of them. I'm okay with that. When it comes to the bodies, well, the full-frame Sony a7R IV has 61 megapixels and the best autofocus of all the cameras I've mentioned, except for those times when the APS-C a6400 is even better. The full-frame S1R and S1H are the most thoroughly thought through and least compromised cameras in the full-frame mirrorless world, save for the autofocus. Good enough, really excellent for most situations, not so much for sports, wildlife, or whack-a-mole. The full-frame SL2 is the most expensive of the lot, with unmatched Ergo's industrial design and heritage, and splits the baby between the S1 and S1R when it comes to the internals and maybe autofocus. You could console yourself that it costs no more than the S1 and S1R put together. The APS-C X-T4's design idiom is the most successful homage to the days of film, arguably the sweet spot right now for true hybrid shooters. Maybe. Hold that thought too. But I think the Leica CL is the most successful homage to a particular camera, the original Leica, using the most advanced industrial design language of them all. Though you wouldn't want to use it for video, even though it is capable of beautiful 4K, small body with no ports and no place for the heat to go. Then again, CL buyers don't get it for video. I know. You could also argue that the Micro Four Thirds GH5 and G9 are unburdened by the past, and with the freedom that comes from a clean sheet design, the most comfortable, least video compromised of the bunch, irrespective of sensor size. In fact, the GH5 is the only camera in this group that can shoot 4K 60p without any crop at all, and when you equalize for depth of field, the differences in sensor noise and dynamic range, especially when you shoot at base ISO, as you should, get pretty narrow. Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. At base ISO with great glass and internal 10-bit 422 recording, I'll tell you that I'd put the GH5 image quality up against any other sensor of any size for 4K work, though you might want to tweak the color a bit in post. But get this. When you price out the GH5's kissing cousin G9 with 10 to 25 1.7 and 50 to 200 2.8 to 4, an X-T4 with 16 to 55 and 50 to 140 2.8s, or an a7R with 24 to 70 and 70 to 200 f4s, they're all within a couple of $100s of each other. In the real world, with real audiences looking at things through YouTube, you will be very hard-pressed to choose one system over the other on the basis of IQ. You do get twice the reach with the G9, which just about offsets any cropping advantage of a bigger, higher megapixel count sensor. In other words, neither the sensor format these days nor price, the two big things for most of us, nor bit depth or chroma sampling either, as it turns out, again for most of us, are the most important things after all. Like I keep saying, it's the details, the smallest details. If the quality and precision of the shutter release is critical to you, for example, you may want to look beyond the Sony. If a soft, delightful shutter release does it for you, but a hair trigger does not, you may want to look beyond the G9 to an X-T4. If you want full frame and a flippy screen, only the S1H will do. If you're one of those people who believes the only rightful place for a camera's on-off switch is around the shutter collar, forget the S1R, SL2, or GH5. If you're serious about video and rely on HDMI connections to a monitor or recorder, the micro HDMI ports on the Sonys and that X-T4 may scare you off as well they should. That kind of port is simply unreliable for regular use. On the other hand, the inability to record video may well lead you away from the M10P. It ought to. Of course, price, the absence of an EVF, and the lack of autofocus may do that too, but don't underestimate the power of singular purpose, the role of heritage, the joy of tiny jewel-like manual focus lenses, or the result that can be achieved by being forced to slow down and focused on just one kind of image making. I'm driving myself nuts from all of this, but I am on a roll now, and you just might be amazed by these details. If you want real-time depth of field preview, what serious photographer or videographer doesn't want this? You'll have to look past the Leica SL2 and CL to Panasonic, Sony, and Fujifilm. I just don't know how that happened. Heck, you can even get depth of field on an M10P, though you can only see this using a manual aperture lens and by looking at the rear screen, which, by the way, is not the brightest of the bunch, and may be a big deal to some of us, irrelevant to others, I acknowledge, and you'll have to look at this across all cameras. You want an XLR mic adapter? I get it, but sorry, neither the G9 nor the X-T4 has one. If that's critical to you, and you aren't willing to use a splitter cable or an external recorder, you'll have to look to Sony or the Panasonic GH5 and S1 triplets. You want to charge your camera while recording and plug in headphones? Sorry, no can do with the X-T4 or G9. The G9 doesn't allow charging while recording, and the X-T4 requires a USB-C to 3.5mm adapter for headphones, taking up the lone port that would otherwise be used for power. You want to set your EVF to monochrome while you keep your JPEGs in color. I get that. But forget about the SL2. Look to the S1R. Or just get over it. I did. You want the best positioned, most haptically persuasive joystick in the business. It matters. Well, that would be, the SL2. Do you get annoyed by fiddly secondary controls? You may want to look past the a7R4 and X-T4. Big hands? Ditto. The S1 triplets and the SL2 will be much more likely to speak to you, as will, interestingly enough, the Micro Four Thirds G9 and GH5. You wear glasses? The G9 and S1R have 3-position EVFs, variable eye relief. Don't wear glasses? The G9 has the highest magnification at 0.83x, and you can see the difference. You want to shoot all day long with a single battery? Good luck in any case, but the SL2's relatively small 1850 mAh battery offers less than 2/3 the capacity of the battery in the S1 Trio. Make sure you keep Wi-Fi and Bluetooth off on the SL2, as well as keeping the brightness of the EVF and rear panel as low as you can, although again, that's true for any camera. Conversely, do you want long exposures? I mean, long exposures. The X-T4 can be set to 15 minutes, the SL2 up to half an hour. Sony, 30 seconds. S1R, 1 minute. Pixel shifting. G9, yes. GH5, no. Sony a7R4, yes. SL2, no. S1R, yes. You get it. I'm exhausted, and even there are so many more detailed differences, I'll stop here because the point in all of this is do not buy for specs. Buy for use cases, your use cases. Don't be shamed by sensor size. It's up to you to figure out if a particular camera has all that you need for what you do. Just look very, very closely, camera in hand, shooting what you shoot, doing what you do to make sure it's there. Next. 3. With all of this said, there's little point in having gear if you can't use it, like during a pandemic. Now's the time to take the time to change your mindset, figure out how you can use it by setting a new intention, and then executing. You don't have to travel. You can create worthy images in your hometown, wherever that is or however you define it. I can't begin to tell you how much I miss New York City. I was born in Brooklyn and spent my formative years there. After my family moved further out onto Long Island, Manhattan and Queens remained fixtures of my life. After graduate school, I moved back into the city, Greenwich Village, where I remained until it was time to start a family. Over the past few years, literally up until the lockdown, Claudia and I would commute to New York City sometimes every week for a month at a time, walking the streets, shooting, seeing family, friends, and colleagues. For the last 3 months, nothing, nada, zip, zilch. We haven't put more than 4 miles on the car for a single trip since late February, and that was just to go to the supermarket. The suburbs left me so uninspired that I just couldn't put out videos. Maybe you noticed. If I couldn't shoot my jam, if I couldn't feel the energy, see the textures, experience the diversity and humanity of New York, if I couldn't connect to it, I got depressed, I admit it. But a couple of weeks ago, I finally shook it off. I developed a new intention, embrace where we were and what we did have. And yeah, we are incredibly fortunate. We are safe. We have financial maneuvering room. There is much to see right where we are if we choose to see it. So I'm already deep into our next book based on trips to that supermarket and a walking radius of about half a mile from our home. Next week, we do our first on-location shoot with a local model, who knew, walking distance from home, social distancing and masks and gloves in place. If you haven't already done so, give it a try. Set an intention, decide you will see things worthy of capture, and then go out and capture them. So, what I've learned is 4. It's okay to feel what you feel, grieve, get angry, get depressed, eat way too much ice cream. But then get over it. Life is for the living. Sometimes, often, we process our feelings through our work. This is especially true of artists. Sometimes the only way we can cope, artists or not, is to bury ourselves in our work. Sometimes we stress eat. I know. Sometimes we use humor in our work, humor outside of work, to shield ourselves from our feelings. Like this short I did earlier this month, nominally about testing a new action cam. Stick around so that I can share the story behind it with you. This is the story. Some of you may know that our brother-in-law Andrew succumbed to COVID-19 at the end of March. A few days later, he would have turned 61. It hit us hard, much harder than we'd anticipated. This pandemic not only took him from us, it prevented us from grieving the way we want to grieve, which is in person, with hugs. Claudia and I filmed that short when our feelings were still very raw. I can see it now in this very small film. Andrew gave me a camera, this camera, a Minolta X700, only months before he died. It was in a box along with a bunch of other things, junk to him really, for which he had no affinity. He asked me if I wanted it. I didn't, but what came out of my mouth was, wow, thank you. I did it because sometimes the generous thing is to accept a kindness you don't need or want. Now, I'm glad he gave it to me. I'm glad I kept it. Andrew, you live on in your family, friends, and at least in our house, that camera. Every time I see it or pick it up, I think of you. At first, I couldn't look at it. When I did, I usually got upset. Then more often than not, I'd get angry. This just shouldn't have happened. But now, if it doesn't make me sad, it makes me smile. I will always remember our extended family vacations down at the Jersey Shore. You, the grillmeister, in a battle of reflexes and reach with your barbecue tongs, fending off the encroaching gulls from the dinner you were preparing for us. But it was always your voice and your very Brooklyn accent with a twinkle in your eye while you waved wildly at them to get out of here, which truly scared them away. For those of you who have experienced loss or are going through it now, if it gets to the point where you feel broken from anger, pain, fear, helplessness, whatever, I want to tell you, you are not alone. You can get through it, and you just may find, as some of us have, that you will come out stronger in the broken places. Moving on, sharing is amazing. There is nothing quite like the thrill of discovery, the joy of sharing what we've learned, and recognizing that same thrill manifests itself in someone else. Just a few months ago, we lived in a world where we shared things over a meal, over a cup of coffee, on a park bench or a rooftop, at our workshops in New York. Someday, we will again. In the meantime, we have the time to grow in other ways, share in other ways. Read books, watch films, participate in live streams, direct message, post on Instagram, with captions, always try to include captions, Zoom, FaceTime, Hangout. So many new verbs from nouns and trade names. In addition to encouraging you to take advantage of free live streams from companies such as B&H, Adorama, Leica, Hasselblad, and more, today I'd like to recommend a book. No, not mine, though I'll put a link to it down below, but legendary photographer William Klein's Celebration. First, because at about $20, it's just 1/20th the price of even a very well-worn copy of his seminal book, New York, first published in 1956. And second, because it is an abridged look at his work not only in New York, but across 5 other great world cities, Rome, Moscow, Tokyo, Madrid, and Paris. 2 of which, by the way, remain on my bucket list, Moscow and Tokyo. Someday. It's also an interesting way to put what we're going through into a little more perspective. 6. I live to shoot. I did not know this until this pandemic. I did not actually realize it until last week. Of course, shooting is not as important as family, but for my own happiness when I'm not with family or friends, or especially when I am with Claudia, there is simply nothing that gives me such joy, makes me feel so alive, so in the moment. Yeah. There are lessons to be learned always, but this can be especially true in trying times. My wish for you, our wish for you, is that in these dark times, you have or find your own lessons, that you find clarity for and light in yourself, that you see those same things in others. Most importantly, we wish that you and yours stay safe. Thanks again to Squarespace.com for making this episode of 3 Blind Men and an Elephant possible. For all of your website needs, if you're a small or mid-sized business, a solopreneur, Squarespace is the place to go. Get your free, no strings attached 14-day trial at www.squarespace.com/hugh. And if at the end you decide you really love it and are ready to go for it, save 10% by using the discount code HUGH at checkout.